Endless Nights of the Zagros, a short horror story by Vahid Sajadafar.
The valleys of the Zagros were enveloped in an eerie silence. The full moon bathed the hills and mountains in its cold light, while the wind whispered indistinct murmurs through the oak trees. An old woman with a wrinkled face and lifeless eyes sat on a stone slab, knitting an old scarf. Her young grandson, Armin, watched her with curious eyes. "Grandma, are the scary stories they tell about these valleys true?" Armin's voice trembled. The old woman slowly lifted her head and gazed at the sky. "Yes, my son, they are true. This is a place where restless spirits and unknown creatures lie in wait." The following night, Armin and his friends decided to venture into the mountains in the dead of night. The sense of adventure and ignorance of the dangers led them towards the dark path the old woman had always spoken of. The cold night breeze tingled their skin, and the sound of leaves crunching underfoot filled them with dread. "Let's set up camp here," Ollie, Armin's friend, suggested excitedly. They pitched their tent and lit a small fire. In the middle of the night, strange sounds began to be heard, heavy footsteps approached, and incomprehensible conversations wafted through the wind. Armin awoke. He didn't know how many hours had passed, but the strange and eerie sounds around him had unsettled him. He stepped out of the tent and saw that all his friends were awake, looking around anxiously. "Did you hear that too?" Armin asked. "Yeah, it sounded like talking, but I couldn't understand what was being said," Ollie replied. Suddenly, a louder sound than the previous ones echoed from among the trees. They all turned towards it in fear. A tall, unknown shadow was visible among the trees. Fear gripped Armin's entire being. The shadow slowly approached them, and the air grew colder. His friends, one by one, succumbed to terror and fled. But Armin, paralyzed with fear, couldn't move. A shadow emerged from the trees. It was a woman with a beautiful face, but eyes devoid of spirit. She wore a long, white dress and extended her hands towards Armin. Her voice was soft and somnolent. "Why have you come here? This is no place for humans." Armin tried with all his might to run, but the woman followed him. His breathing grew rapid, and his heart pounded. At that moment, an old woman with terrifying eyes appeared before him. The old woman looked at Armin with a penetrating gaze. "You did not know, but now you must. This is a place where restless spirits seek peace. You and your friends should not have come here." With a shaky voice, Armin asked, "But why? What is hidden here?" The old woman gave a bitter smile. "This valley is the oldest cursed place in the Zagros. Those who enter must face their deepest fears." Armin fled back to the village. Each of his friends had their own story of encountering their fears. The old woman warned them never to approach that valley again. The nights of the Zagros remained filled with the whispers of the wind and terrifying shadows, but Armin and his friends had learned their lesson. The whispers of the wind and the mysterious shadows in the trees continued. Armin and his friends' sense of curiosity and restlessness remained ignited. They sought a way to uncover the hidden truth in this cursed valley. Perhaps this time, with more preparation and the knowledge gained from their previous experience, they could unravel the dark and dangerous secrets of the Zagros. Armin thought once more about the endless nights of the Zagros. Something in that cursed valley remained that wouldn't let him rest. The shadows, the whispers, and the lifeless gaze of the mysterious woman replayed in his mind. His restlessness grew day by day until he could no longer ignore it. With a determined decision, Armin gathered his friends. "We have to go back. Something is waiting for us there. I can't shake this feeling." Ollie and the others, with a mix of fear and excitement, agreed. They told themselves that this time they would go with more caution and proper equipment. Perhaps this time they could uncover the secrets of this dark valley. It was a foggy night. The moonlight barely reached the ground through the clouds. Armin and his friends moved towards the valley with heavy steps and trembling hearts. Every sound in the darkness held their breath. The rustling leaves and the howling wind planted more fear in their hearts with each passing moment. Suddenly, the familiar whispers could be heard from a distance. They quickened their steps and proceeded with greater caution. Their hearts pounded, and each tried to hide their fear. They reached the point where they had first seen the shadows. There, the old woman appeared again. This time, the old woman looked at Armin with a harsher and more serious gaze. "Why have you returned? Did you not heed my warning? This time, there may be no way back." With a trembling voice, Armin said, "We need to know the truth. We can't live with this ambiguity." The old woman shook her head. "Very well, but know that this is a path of no return." At that moment, the shadows emerged from the trees. Each shadow had its own distinct form, some were tall and thin, others short and wide, all with hollow eyes that stared directly at Armin and his friends. One of the shadows, with heavy steps, approached Armin. His heart raced, and cold sweat ran down his forehead as he took a step back. The shadow drew closer and stood before Armin. With a voice that seemed to come from the depths of hell, it said, "This is no place for humans. Your return means death." Suddenly, one of Armin's friends, terrified, fled, but another shadow caught him and disappeared into the darkness. His screams echoed among the trees for a long time. Ollie looked around in fear, but before he could react, another shadow approached and swallowed him too. Armin was left alone. The shadows encircled him as if they had reached their prey. The old woman approached Armin and said softly, "This is your fate. Now you must face the bitter truth of this valley." Armin was trapped among the shadows and restless spirits. Fear and horror penetrated his soul, but at the final moment, the shadows retreated, and Armin was left alone in the darkness. He didn't know if he was alive or if his spirit had joined the ranks of the restless spirits. The old woman had vanished, and only the whispers of the wind echoed in his ears. Armin slowly made his way back to the village. The wounds and pain on his body and soul were reminders of an experience he would never forget. But he still didn't know if his return was real or if he had become part of the shadows and restless spirits of the Zagros. Armin returned to the village with difficulty. The people were worried and astonished upon seeing him. No one believed he had come back alive. With tired eyes and a wounded spirit, he told his story to his grandmother. She looked at him deeply and said, "You are the only one who returned from this valley with a brave heart. Maybe you can put an end to what we have feared all these years." Armin asked his grandmother, "How can I break this curse?" She gave a bitter smile and said, "You must see yourself in the mirror of truth. You need to face all your fears and regrets. Only when you forgive yourself and free yourself from your past, can you liberate this valley from its curse." Armin returned to his home and spent days and nights in solitude, pondering. He had to confront his fears, the fear of losing his friends, the fear of the unknown, and the fear of himself. With each passing day, he looked deeper into himself, trying to understand who he was. One night, when the full moon was shining in the sky, Armin decided to return to the valley. This time he was alone. Some of his friends had fallen prey to the shadows the last time, and the rest refused to return. He didn't want to endanger anyone else. Armin reached the valley. The whispers of the wind and mysterious shadows still lingered in the air. He went to the place where he had first seen the shadows and closed his eyes. At that moment, the shadows appeared again, and the old woman looked at him with compassion. "Are you ready to face the truth?" she asked. Armin nodded in agreement. The shadows encircled him, and a clear mirror appeared before him. He looked into the mirror and saw his reflection, not just his face, but all his memories, fears, and regrets. He had to confront everything he saw and forgive himself. Armin stared into the mirror, seeing everything. Tears streamed down his face, but he didn't retreat. With each passing moment, he understood himself better and accepted his fears. Suddenly, the mirror shone with a warm, comforting light. The shadows disappeared one by one, and the whispers in the wind faded away. Armin felt a weight lift off his shoulders. The old woman smiled and gently said, "You did it. The curse of this valley has been lifted. Now, this place will be one of peace and tranquility." With a deep sigh of relief, Armin felt like he was starting a new life. He returned to the village with light steps and a calm heart. The people rejoiced and were amazed to hear his story. The nights in Zagros were no longer filled with fear and shadows, but with peace and the light of the moon. Armin and his friends never experienced those fears again, but they learned valuable lessons from this adventure. They realized that true courage lies in facing inner fears, and that only through acceptance and forgiveness can one attain real peace. Yet still, in a corner of Zagros, the whispers of the wind remind of a dark past, and those who have gone through it never forget what they left behind. The Valley of Zagros, with all its secrets, had become a place for reflection and discovering inner truths, a place where anyone could seek peace and tranquility.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.